To get the content of our course started, and for the next couple of nuggets, we're going to focus on the C Series rack mounted servers in the UCS product portfolio. Now, these C Series we're going to focus on as standalone servers. Later on in this course, we'll have a nugget where we take the C Series and we make sure we integrate them into the overall UCS management with, of course, the UCS Manager. So for right now, something kind of unique. We'll help organizations that have some C-Series devices that they want to really treat as standalone equipment. Now, we'll start things out in this nugget with a quick tour, just kind of refresh you on the C series. We'll use a real typical one, the C200M2 rack mount server. That's the one depicted right there, and we'll tour the guts of this thing and the ports that are available on it. And then we'll jump in and we'll talk about installation concerns that you would have, processes that you would go through to get the thing installed. From a certification standpoint, by far one of the most important sections of this particular nugget will be as I walk you through updating the many ingredients that represent the firmware. Cisco makes this pretty easy on us, and I'll demonstrate for you live in this nugget exactly how to do it. So let's take a quick tour of the C200M2. Now, you're probably wondering, why did Anthony pick this particular C-Series rack mount server? Well, the answer? Your certification exam environment is going to really showcase it. So I wanted to sync up with your certification exam. With the C200M2, we have one or two Intel Xeon processors. This device supports the 5500 series processor and the 5600 series processor, so a wide variety of Xeon processors for you to choose from. 12 DIMM slots for a max of 192 gigabytes. If that sounds like a lot of potential RAM, it is, but keep in mind that other C-Series rack-mounted servers are going to really outdo that number quite well. 2 integrated gigabit Ethernet ports. We're going to talk more about those integrated ports coming up. Obviously, you're going to be curious about what is their default configuration, and I'll share that with you. Up to 8 front accessible hot swappable hard drives. Wow, very cool. And a full option for RAID support. Some RAID levels integrated right into the C-Series device. Other RAID levels will be supported through the option of an additional card. UCS Integrated Management Controller. Remember now, we are talking about this C-Series in a standalone configuration in this nugget. So we need integrated management capabilities because we are not going to be discussing using the UCS system to manage this device at this point. So excellent news that we have an integrated management controller that we can leverage to fully manage the device while it is outside of the umbrella of control presented by the overall UCS system. We've got redundant fans and power supplies, and then, very important, we've got 2 PCI Express slots 2.0. These two 2.0 PCI Express slots are going to be critical for you adding capabilities to your device like Unified Fabric, like doing really high-end fiber channel over Ethernet connectivity. Now, I would feel awfully silly if I ended our tour of the C-Series there. I mean, after all, because that particular device is showcased in your certification exam, I don't want you to think that's it as far as options go for the C-Series. So here we are up at Cisco.com. And what I'm going to do is demonstrate for you how we can learn about the additional servers in that product family. And there's a lot of them. So we're going to go and we're going to choose products and services. And where you would want to go is servers unified computing. When you select that option, you'll see there is a category for rack servers, UCS C-Series. There's some devices on sale, which are SmartPlay offers, but you would probably want to go to the Show Products link. And then under the Show Products link, you would go ahead and click on UCS C-Series rack servers. So this is going to be kind of your launch pad in order to get to the various servers. Notice they've been organized into enterprise critical. So these are your highest end devices. Then you've got enterprise class. Then you've got scale out. Then you've got, and that's it. So you see there's a bunch of different devices in here, including some of the highest end rack mount servers that Cisco has ever manufactured. Here's the UCS C420 M3, for example, and let's look at some of its characteristics, and we can immediately in our head compare it to the C200 that we looked at. The C200 had support for up to 2 Intel Xeon processors. This device has support for up to 4, and they're Xeon E5 4600s. We had roughly 190 gigs of RAM supported in ours. How about 1.5 terabytes of RAM thanks to a whopping 48 DIMM slots? We had support for up to 8 hard drives, up to 16 in this device. We had 2 PCI 2.0 card slots. How about 7 PCI Express Generation 3 slots? We had 2 integrated 1 gigabit LAN interfaces on the motherboard. This has 4. So you're getting a sense for how there's going to be a wide variety of form factors for you to take advantage of when it comes to your C-Series rack-mounted servers. Okay, awesome. Now let's get back to our focus on the C200M2. What I want to go through with you next is installation. Now, as far as physically installing the thing, right? Rack mounting it and cabling it up, Cisco's going to provide an excellent step-by-step for you. Let me show you where you can find that. So you notice I'm starting over with you at Cisco.com. This time we're going to go up to Support. And under Support, on the left-hand column here of the drop-down is Product Support. Let's go to All Products. This is going to give us this nice familiar grid that we can utilize to search absolutely everything Cisco sells. And that's a lot of stuff. So under Products, in the middle column, we're going to go to Servers Unified Computing. What are we interested in? We're interested in the UCS C-Series rack servers. So I'm going to select that link. Here we have the installation and upgrade guides. We're going to select that, and then we're going to select our particular model. What are we focusing on? Well, as you know, we're focusing on the UCS C200. So we select that. Over on the left-hand side are our chapters. And by the way, it might be a good idea to download this complete book in PDF form, but we're interested in installing the server in this particular demonstration. And notice, unpacking and inspecting, followed by a section on preparing for installation, followed by a section on installing the server into a rack. Notice if you wanted to download this particular chapter in a PDF form, there's a link for that in the top right of the document. So let's be sure to print this documentation and go through it carefully as we're physically rack mounting that particular device. So you have followed the instructions that Cisco provides for properly cabling and rack mounting that server. You're now ready to configure it. You press power. You wait for the prompt and then press F8 on the keyboard in order to access the BIOS Cisco Integrated Management Controller configuration utility. This is going to allow you to dictate the settings that you'll use to interact with the particular device from a management perspective. Let me show you what this screen looks like. When you access this screen, notice there's a NIC mode area. There's dedicated, shared LOM, and Cisco card. What in the world does this mean? And what is this NIC redundancy all about? Well, let me go ahead and guide you through this. Under the NIC mode, dedicated indicates that you want to use the 10100 management port. That's it. You're going to use the 10100 management port to interact and configure the device. Notice when you use this particular mode, there is none for NIC redundancy, and that's your only option. There's no such thing as NIC redundancy when we're using the single dedicated 10100 management port on the C-Series. Makes sense. The default setting is for you to use the shared LAN on motherboard ports. That's the default. Let me spell default correctly. There we go. So that's the shared LAN, and that's the default setting. When you're in this setting, you must set the NIC redundancy mode. By default, the NIC redundancy mode is active, and we'll cover those different modes in a moment. Now, another option that you have for setting the NIC mode is the Cisco card. The Cisco card would be for you to utilize the network interface card that's installed in the C-Series device. Currently, the only supported cards for this mode would be the Cisco UCS P81E virtual interface card, and that would be installed in PCI Express slot 6. So, very, very strict requirements for this Cisco card to be an option for you to access the device for management purposes. And once again, if this is the mode you go with, you will need to set a particular NIC redundancy mode. Now, what are our NIC redundancy modes all about? Well, obviously, we have the option of don't have any redundancy whatsoever. So we're going to be connected to one of the shared LAN on motherboard gigabit ports, and that's it. If that port fails, we don't fail over to the other port, even though it might be sitting there healthy. There's active standby, in which one of the two ports will be the active and will be forwarding the management traffic, and if it fails, we'll have a failover to the second one. And then, as you might guess, our active mode means that these ports are indeed channeled together. So they're both going to be passing management traffic, and if one were to fail, everything would go over the other one. Notice we are in a default setting of shared LAN on motherboard and active. Now, in this screen, you can also set up whether or not you're going to use DHCP and what you're going to use for a VLAN. By default, DHCP is utilized. So, can't emphasize it enough, and as you might guess, I'm emphasizing this from a certification standpoint. What are the defaults on the C200M2? We are in shared LAN by default. We are in active by default, and we are to use DHCP by default. Certainly worth memorizing from a certification perspective. So installation, you know there's a great guide, and we walk through the most complicated part, really, and that is how exactly we're going to configure the network adapters for our management access. Now let's turn to another very important topic, and that is updating our firmware. I have a device here in the house from a networking perspective that doesn't work all that great. And sure enough, there's never any firmware updates from the manufacturer. Really upsets me. The devices that I have in the home networking environment that work wonderful are sure enough those devices where I see, about quarterly updates in the firmware on those devices. As you might guess, there is a lot that can be updated through firmware in the C-Series device. And Cisco utilizes the host upgrade utility. All right, we want to memorize this particular utility for certification purposes, certainly for the updating of many elements of firmware. What does this particular utility upgrade? Well, let me show you. The host upgrade utility is your one-stop shop for a wide variety of firmware updates. Yeah, what a great idea by Cisco. One of those updates is the Cisco Integrated Management Controller itself. So when enhancements, stability improvements are to be made in this key network management point on your standalone C-Series rack-mounted server, this is a great way to upgrade it. The system BIOS, the LAN on motherboard, the RAID controllers, and then think adapters. The P81E from virtual interface card from Cisco Systems. Some of the Broadcom adapters, some of the Intel adapters are getting their firmware updates from this host upgrade utility. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, Anthony, kind of sold on this concept. Where? Where in the world do I get the host upgrade utility? Well, let me show you right now. So here we are at Cisco.com, and by the way, I just finally read this headline, introducing CMX for Facebook Wi-Fi. Engage and gain insight into your customers. I have no idea what any of that is about. I'm going to have to learn more later. Okay, anyways, up at the top we see support. We're going to go to the support tab and notice there is a downloads area. So awesome. We want to go to the downloads. And you know what? I don't like this navigation path that I'm taking. Let's try again. I'm going to point at support. Okay. And from the downloads area, I like to choose all downloads. Look at this. It will bring us back to that familiar grid interface that we like so much, that I like to use consistently. Under products, I go to servers and unified computing like I did before. Over on the right, we want C-Series rack mount standalone server software. Remember, the focus of this nugget is indeed the C-Series when it's standalone, when it's not under the management umbrella of the UCS system in total. All right, so great, we're going to go there. Now we get a nice long laundry list of all of our servers. We have been focusing on the C200M2 rack mount server, so I'm going to go to that server software category, and here we can see all of the software imaginable that is available for us for that particular product. We want to go to the server firmware category, and there is our Cisco UCS host upgrade utility. Please take note of the naming convention that is used here. So we have UCS, the Unified Computing System. We have C200, that's of course the model of server we're dealing with. HUU to integrate host upgrade utility, and then 1.4.3 is our actual firmware version number, right? So we are dealing with 1.4.3U actually is the update version of this firmware, and notice it's an ISO image. So we can download this and easily burn this to media. Now, let me show you a really easy way in which to work with that ISO image in order to install the firmware. So what you're going to do is connect to your Cisco Integrated Management Controller using the IP address that you've acquired by default, that would be DHCP, to your particular C-Series rack mount server. When you get into the Cisco Integrated Management Controller GUI, over here in the server tab, you're going to choose remote presence, and you're going to go ahead and make sure you've enabled the virtual keyboard, video, and mouse feature. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and target the virtual media tab so that we can go ahead and initialize, so that we can remotely mount that image, that ISO image that we downloaded. Now you can head over to the summary option on the server tab, and you can choose launch KVM console from the actions area on that server summary page. Once you launch the KVM console, you'll have a VM tab in the KVM console. Now, that VM tab doesn't stand for virtual machine. That tab stands for virtual media. Yeah, and that's where you can go ahead and mount that ISO image that you downloaded to do your firmware upgrade. So once you have mounted the media in your virtual media tab, and there it is in the KVM console, you're going to go ahead and initiate the host upgrade utility. It's totally idiot proof. You're going to accept an end user license agreement and you're going to walk through responding to wizard like questions that are presented to you. At the end, you'll be presented with this summary of exactly what has transpired thanks to the host upgrade utility. Well, you've done great in this nugget. Now it's time to bring it all together in a final exam. You ready? And by the way, I try and tailor these final exam questions so they not only ensure that you are prepared for your certification environment, but also have some real world significance too. So we would be able to demonstrate our mastery of these technologies in the actual data center. So here we go. Which of the following are default settings on a standalone C-Series server from Cisco? Notice we have to choose two. Would that be shared LAN on motherboard mode, dedicated mode, active standby, or active active, or Cisco card? Let's work through this. The dedicated mode, that option, remember, would be the 10100 port that is for management only that's on the C-Series. That sounds like a good option, but actually it's shared LAN on motherboard mode. Remember, there's the two 1 gigabit per second ports on the device. By default, those are the way in which we are going to interact with the device for management. So it is shared LAN on motherboard mode. It is not Cisco card mode either. That would be for a very specific Cisco network card installed in the device. That's not the default. So now that we've come up with A as correct, the shared LAN on motherboard mode, now we have to decide which of these redundancy options is it. Is it active standby? Is it active active? Is it none, which wasn't an option here but could have been an option here? Those were the three options for redundancy for that network connectivity, and it turns out that the answer is indeed active active. So we can remember this just by realizing that Cisco does us a favor. It does a shared LAN on motherboard mode, so we have two 1 gigabit per second ports for network management interactions with the device, and we're in a nice redundant active-active configuration by default. Great work. So in this nugget, we laughed, we cried, we had an awesome time, didn't we? We took a quick tour of one of the stars of the show when it comes to the C-Series. It was a C200M2. We focused on this particular device because it's very representative of the C-Series, and Cisco has a particular affection for it in the certification exam environment. We talked about installation, and I think one of the most important things we discovered in this section was just how relatively easy it is to find an excellent free of charge installation guide up at Cisco.com. So you're going to get the guidance of Cisco for upgrading that device, if you needed to upgrade something inside it, for installing it in its rack in your data center, for connecting the keyboard, video, and mouse adapter, for powering that thing on. And then once we got that thing turned on and we understood the various modes that we can interact with that device with, we talked about updating its firmware. A big part of the firmware updating process was, of course, utilizing the host upgrade utility, or the HUU. We saw how easy this was relatively to find. That's the tough part, is finding it on Cisco.com, and then the easy part is downloading that particular utility and then launching it as virtual media inside the Cisco Integrated Management Controller and stepping through the firmware upgrade process. Remember, that utility allowed us to install a whole bunch and upgrade a whole bunch, including the Cisco Integrated Management Controller, the network adapters that are on the particular device, the BIOS. So, a very important upgrade utility available for us. Remember, it's worth me repeating one last time. The focus of this nugget, of course, was the C series, but it was the C series in a standalone fashion. Much later in the course, we'll revisit the C series, but we'll talk about the C series in the context of integrated fully into the overall UCS management. Well, I hope this nugget has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.